Hello, I'm Jake Boudreau, civic journalist at Tello Community Television. This week, on the record, a local businessman is awarded the province's highest honor. Another off-highway vehicle trail in Richmond County is added to Nova Scotia's road trail system. A fire department serving parts of Richmond County will receive federal funding to become a comfort center during emergencies. The provincial government provides an update on Budget 2024-2025. And I attended the January 7th public meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council. But first, the local Member of Parliament reacts to the resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. With me today is the Member of Parliament for Breton-Canso. Welcome back, Mike Kelloway.
Hey, Jake, how are you?
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that he will be stepping down, and not just as Prime Minister, but as Liberal leader, obviously. And I know you issued a statement on Facebook also on January 6th talking about that. But, before we get into that, maybe talk about what was your reaction to that announcement.
My first reaction, to be quite honest with you, Jake, is gratitude. Even though the Prime Minister has served as Prime Minister for 9 years, but he's also spent his entire life in the political limelight with his dad, and then speculation back in the day, would he run for leadership? Then he did, and then he took a party that was in third place to first place. That is a substantial achievement on itself. But if I look at some of the policies that he put forward, like the Canada Child Benefit, that has had direct impact in our community in Cape Breton, Breton-Canso, I think of dental care. I think of an increased amount of money to the provincial governments for healthcare in the last couple of years. I think of, setting the stage for pharmacare. These are substantial and just kind of touch the surface of his time in government. So gratitude would be one. And also the fact that this chapter comes to a conclusion and a new chapter begins. And now we begin to select a new leader and a new prime minister, which will be key because, whether it's late spring or the fall, whatever the case may be, we're going to have a federal election that will provide two distinct paths. One will be a centrist government, focused on center policies that are moderate, that are focused on Canadians, that are focused on the foundation of dental care and pharmacare and the child benefit and focusing on seniors. Or we're going to go, and again, this is not political, this is just where Mr. Poilievre has stated he's going to go, hard right, which means a lot of things. So we're going to, select a leader that is going to provide a new vision built on those items that I just mentioned and many more. But also this will give an opportunity for the new prime minister to re-examine some of the policies that we put forward that he or she may want to alter or change. So it's bittersweet in the sense of when someone gives their life to politics and goes in the arena and takes the hits, because I've said time and time again, leadership is really easy during the good times. But leadership is tested during challenging times. COVID, for example. I think of COVID, and I think we came out of COVID as a country in terms of the economy well compared to other G7 nations and other nations writ large. That's largely to do because at least in Nova Scotia, for example, it was 9 out of $10 that was spent during COVID was federal dollars. And that money went to support you, went to support businesses, went to support not-for-profits, went to support individuals through the CERB. It was a substantial decision to make. People can think like, well, any government would have made that. No, that's why elections matter, because we could have went a different route and decided not to fund small businesses, not to fund individuals, and laissez-faire, as the Conservatives say, that the invisible hand will, the economy will right itself. But the Prime Minister didn't do that, and I think for the most part we didn't get everything right, but we did our best to protect Canadians, and I think he'll go down as someone that did his best to protect Canadians. And so, it's a substantial moment in time for Canadians. And it also will give months and months ahead, at least 3 or 4 months, 2 or 3 months rather. It'll give people an opportunity to re-examine their vote. Why are they going to vote a certain way? What are the ramifications of voting this way or that way? And I'm excited about that. So gratitude and sadness for him, but also just gratitude and thanks to him. And also excited about the chapters ahead. I'm going to Ottawa tomorrow. I'm going to attend a caucus meeting, a 6-hour caucus meeting on all of this. Love to report back at some point, Jake, through you, because I think it's important for people to know what it is I'm doing. What am I a part of? I'm sure the names will come out if they haven't come out already in terms of leadership. I hear the same things you hear. You've got, Mark Carney, you've got Chrystia Freeland, you've got Dominic LeBlanc, you've got Anita Anand, you've got Melina Joly, you've got Christy Clark, who's the former Premier of British Columbia. There's a lot of heavy hitters coming out, at least coming out vis-a-vis the media of interest. Well, now people will step up to the plate and take their swings, and I'm excited to be a part of that. And I think that Canadians have told me, and constituents have told me, that there's a lot of apprehension right now. There's a lot of nervousness right now in terms of where we go as a country. And I want them to know, as I said in another media outlet, I want to let them know that I'll be judging the next leader, on a couple of things. The touch, taste, and feel in terms of policies that they will put forward and how they impact my constituents. For me, it's about Main Street, not Bay Street. Although Bay Street is tied to Main Street, Main Street is tied to Bay Street. And it's about, why do they want to be a leader? Why do they want to be Prime Minister? Sister Peggy Butts, she was an instructor, a professor at St. FX and University College, Cape Breton, later became a senator, Jake. She would often tell me, when I took all of my poli-sci classes from her, she would say, there are 2 types of people that go into politics. And there are 2 types of people that go in to be the leader of politics, of a political party. There's one that they go into it to be someone. The second is to do something. And anyone watching this knows, when you come in contact with anyone, let alone in politics, you know firsthand if that individual is doing it for the right reasons. And that's what I'll be judging. Do they want to do something, or they want to be someone? And that'll be a fundamental aspect of my decision.
Now, on January 6th, after the Prime Minister made his announcement, you made some posts on social media thanking the Prime Minister for his years of public service. And you mentioned here one thing: it is easy to lead in good times, but it takes true strength to lead when times are tough. That strength is what we have seen from the Prime Minister throughout his tenure, which has included a global pandemic and its unprecedented economic ramifications. And you noted, those challenges that the Prime Minister faced. Upon taking over as Prime Minister, he did not inherit a great economic situation and had to kind of right the ship there. Then you had the pandemic, and then there were some policies and decisions that people did not agree with and were kind of unpopular for whatever you think of them. I'm thinking of the carbon tax, for example, as one. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I mean, sometimes when you're in leadership, you have to make unpopular decisions and approve policies that maybe not every Canadian agrees with.
No, for sure. And I think, you could look at the history of Canada and look at leaders of all political stripes that have had to make tough decisions, have had to lead in difficult times. And that ranges from the most immediate, the recent history of Canada to right now. And the reality is that it's a big job, and you try your best to protect Canadians, and you try your best to put forward programs that are going to help Canadians. If you look at the carbon pricing, for example, that is an interesting one, because the central goal of the carbon pricing is to reduce emissions and change people's behaviors in a variety of ways. You know, it was designed to be ecologically sound, but economically sound too. And my thought on that is that it wasn't introduced to the public correctly. And people need to know why they're making a transformational change. So, and they also need to know, you know, why do 300 economists believe this is the most sound, ecological, and economic way to do it? Because when you look at the carbon tax, there's also a carbon rebate. And if you look at Mr. Poilievre, he wants to get rid of the carbon tax, okay, but he also wants to get rid of the rebate. So the question is there other ways to attack that through a cap and trade? Well, time will tell. That might be something that the new leader decides. But the Prime Minister felt it important to ensure that people make those changes while also getting rebates back. Now, you know, you look at Mulroney with the GST. You look at Mulroney with the free trade deal. At the time, those were considered, they weren't warmly received. Let's put it that way. But now they have become part of the kind of the mainstay of Canadian culture and political culture, at least. But the reality is if you look at leadership and you look at someone like Mr. Trudeau, he's a fighter. And, you know, back in the day when I was young, there would be 15 rounds to a fight. Now I think there's 12. But he goes in every day, as he said in his press conference, and you can feel it when you're in caucus with him, that he gives a damn, that he cares. And sometimes in a boxing match, you're going to throw a jab, you're going to take a hit, you're going to get hit again, you're going to throw another jab, and it's a combat sport politics. And he's managed to be prime minister for 9 years. To me, that's politically a success, but it's more than that. It's someone, no matter what political stripe, even Stephen Harper, he was there for 9 years. It takes, you have to have, unless you're an internet troll, you have to have respect for a Stephen Harper to be in 9 years. You have to have a healthy respect for that. You have differences of policy. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Prime Minister. I mean, you imagine this. Imagine that you had signs that said F. Boudreau or F. Kelloway. Well, they're not just talking about that last name is also the name that his kids share. And to have that poise and to have that resiliency, those are qualities of leadership. You may disagree with policy, but personal values are really important. So he has those. Now he has a chance to, I think, over the next couple of months, focus on Canadians with respect to the tariffs that are coming, potentially. And make no mistake about it, if these tariffs take hold, even for a month, it has a dramatic impact on our region and our country. So he'll have focus on that, while at the same time, there will be a leadership race. And then at some point we go to the polls. And then Canadians will have a definitive choice to go hard right. And this guy's going to go hard right. That's his ideology. Fair enough. But Canadians need to know this is not the Progressive Conservative Party. This is not even the Conservative Party of Stephen Harper. This is a different party altogether. You know, there's a gentleman he represents New Brunswick riding, Jonathan Williamson, who has made comments that, you know, if they get in, they're going to greatly reduce the ACOA budget. Okay, let's stew on that for a second and how much we rely on that. Let's focus on moving the age of retirement from 65 to 67 again. Let's see a massively reduced public service in Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. So these are things that are not to scare people. They're just facts. So let's have that conversation. Let's focus on the good that the Prime Minister was able to do. Let's also focus on a fair point on carbon pricing. And are there modifications that need to be made to carbon pricing while still maintaining the goals of reducing our carbon footprint? Jake, everything is connected. We look at the Gulf of St. Lawrence, right? We look at the rich fishing grounds of the Gulf, off of Shetty Camp and between, all points in between. Pleasant Bay, in and around the Antigonish area. If you look at the Gulf, for example, in the last 15 years, the temperature of the Gulf has increased by 2 degrees. Now, people might say that's not a lot. Fair enough. But that 2 degrees is driven by emissions. That impacts the warmer the water gets, the danger to crab, the danger to lobster. So everything is connected. So we need to look at that as well in terms of the scope of the carbon pricing. But this might be an opportunity for the new leader to come in and say, here's my thoughts and my policy of how this will be different under the next leader's watch, whoever that person may be. But the Prime Minister has a tremendous amount of my respect, as anybody would serving in that position, because that is not an easy position to hold for a year, let alone 9.
I do intend to follow up with you after your trip to Ottawa, and maybe we can discuss as well which riding you might be running into. We'll probably get into that at that point in time.
Yeah.
But again, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's a busy time for you, and thank you very much.
Well, listen, we watch Tell-Il at home and religiously, actually. So it's good to see you, and I want to wish you a happy new year. And Becky, of course, a happy new year, and everyone that works there. It's really, really important, Jake, that Tell-Il continues to flourish, because we need actual local stories, local news more now than ever. And anytime you want me on, you got me.
A local businessman and philanthropist was announced as a recipient of the 2024 Order of Nova Scotia. Joe Shannon of Port Hawkesbury was recognized for his contributions to business and commerce and philanthropic generosity. Noted business leader, ardent community supporter, and philanthropist, Shannon has helped countless people and organizations throughout Nova Scotia with his entrepreneurial contributions and generosity, the Office of the Lieutenant Governor noted. They said his commitment to community development and philanthropy have been hallmarks of his many endeavors. In addition to building a number of highly successful enterprises and contributing to the development of industries throughout Nova Scotia, the Lieutenant Governor's office said Shannon has been a mentor to aspiring entrepreneurs and business leaders. In this role, they said he has taken time and attention to help guide many individuals and organizations towards success, with a focus on regional development in Nova Scotia. Shannon is a generous and dedicated leader who has left his mark on countless corporations and organizations throughout the country, notably Cape Breton University, said the Lieutenant Governor's office. As chair of numerous fundraising campaigns, he has helped CBU grow, thrive, and diversify, they said, noting he did much to support the development of the Purdy Crawford Chair in Aboriginal Business Studies and Aboriginal Youth Mentorship Program at the Shannon School of Business. His philanthropic contributions outside of CBU have been extensive and include the Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation, QE2 Health Science Center, the Gaelic College, and the Port Hawkesbury Civic Center, among many others, the office added. Nova Scotia's new Lieutenant Governor, Mike Savage, announced the new members on December 23rd. An investiture ceremony will be held at Government House in the spring, when the Lieutenant Governor will present the new members with their insignia and appointment scroll. On January 7th, the Department of Public Works officially released the next group of approved road trail sites. These roadways provide off-highway vehicle riders with more options for trail connectivity and accessing services and amenities, according to the ATV Association of Nova Scotia. The new sites include 500 meters on Rogers Road, 150 meters on Highway 206, and 7.7 kilometers on Highway 320 to connect trails in Almadam to the rail trail into River Tillard. These newly approved road trails bring the total to 26 provincially approved and 4 municipal sites. Additional proposed sites continue to be assessed by the province, and the ATV Association of Nova Scotia will share any updates when they become available. The provincial government said it will continue to focus on what it calls significant investments in healthcare and affordability measures. Finance and Treasury Board Minister John Lohr presented the update on December 20th. The government said it is forecasting a deficit of $247.5 million for the 2024-2025 fiscal year, a $219.9 million improvement from the $467.4 million deficit presented in September. The government said revenue is projected to be $6.5 billion, up $642 million from the budget estimate, mainly because of increases in provincial tax revenues, investment income, and recoveries. The province added that total expenses are projected to be $17 billion, up $440.6 million from the budget estimate, with additional appropriations totaling $253 million required for 10 departments. The Big Pond Volunteer Fire Department will receive $120,000 in non-repayable federal funding to upgrade and equip the fire hall to become a community comfort center. Enhancements include the installation of a new furnace and electrical panel upgrades, as well as 35 new solar panels and electric vehicle charging stations, making the facility greener and completely self-sufficient, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency noted. The Big Pond Fire Hall serves the communities of Big Pond Centre, Irish Cove, Irish Vale, and Ben Yon. But according to a press release from ACOA, no one seeking comfort will be turned away. The funding was delivered through the Hurricane Fiona Recovery Fund, said ACOA. ACOA said the improvements will ensure residents have a safe and welcoming place to go during storms, as well as providing a year-round community hub. ACOA said climate comfort centers play an essential role during extreme weather events, offering residents a place to shelter, charge devices, use the internet, and check in with family and friends. By providing a space where people can feel safe, supported, and connected during times of uncertainty, climate comfort centers help communities recover more quickly once the crisis is past, ACOA added. At the regular monthly meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council, the Tamarack Education Centre Playground Committee asked Town Council to send a letter of support for their grant application to receive a recreation facilities grant from the province of Nova Scotia.
You got a presentation from a parents group over at Tamarack Education Centre. They're looking for Town Council's support of a grant proposal that they're putting in. Is that exactly what happened in terms of the motion that was passed near the end? I just wanted to make sure I get that clarified.
Yeah, absolutely. So council unanimously supported a letter that will support that grant application from the tech parent group. Definitely support around the table to see a new playground established at the tech grounds. Certainly was a wonderful presentation, very well thought out and articulate. And really, Karen and her team did a great job talking about the need for equity in terms of access to playgrounds. I think it was somewhere around the vicinity of 300 children and very little facilities for them to play on, and certainly is a issue that really needs to be remedied.
Now, I was interested in one comment made by Karen, the idea that as a parent living in Tamarack Heights, you simply can't say to your child, well, just hike over to the community park, because that's quite a walk and you're going through trails and forests and such. Is that a legitimate thing to say in terms of Tamarack vis-a-vis the community park?
Well, I think that probably in its heyday, that community, the park at Tech, when it was fully operational, was very much operating as a community playground, and certainly being well used after hours from kids that were living in the vicinity of the Tamarack Heights area. So obviously that's a gap that is now acutely felt. With some of the kids that are living up in Tamarack, they don't have that playground, that close access to use, and unless they're either walking with their parents to the community park or driving with their parents to the community park, it's certainly, I'm sure that gap is being felt. Having such a great team fundraising and applying for monies to really install a playground that will be suitable for those 300 children during school hours, but plus children for after hours. I think it's a wonderful goal to have, and if there's anything that we can do as a town council to help support that, whether it's through advocacy. Obviously, we made a motion to write a letter of support that we will do so in short order. But also we can have a conversation during budget deliberations to see if there's any kind of financial support we can offer as well.
Now, quick question to you from the parent perspective, because you've had 2 children of your own go through the Tamarack education system. What's your thought on just basically a group of parents working diligently like this to try to raise the funds to be able to handle this on their own?
It's definitely a group of passionate parents, and it really does warm my heart just to see that energy and optimism and enthusiasm, and they're working for all of the children. So I mean, some of them have explained that they may not necessarily have kids long term at Tech, so they're doing it for all the kids that are at Tech today, all the kids that will be at Tech over the next 5 years, 10 years. Once they install that new playground, I mean, it's going to make quite a huge difference for all the children that are there, and not just during school hours, but also after school. And this isn't just a Port Hawkesbury thing, because we know that the Strait Regional School Board, it spans well beyond the municipal boundaries of Port Hawkesbury. So while those children are in school, there's children from all over the Strait region that will benefit from that new playground that this parent group is working diligently to be able to raise the funds for.
And Karen mentioning as well that this isn't a matter of just doing this for Tech and for its families and its children. They're hoping to raise the bar to make sure that playgrounds across Nova Scotia are equitable and accessible for all. Do you get the sense that this could help set a standard and a precedent for schools, not just in the Strait, but also across Nova Scotia if it's successful?
I sure hope it does. I mean, at the end of the day, wouldn't it be wonderful if every single school all across the province of Nova Scotia, didn't have to fundraise to have at least a set standard of a playground that's adequate for the number of children in the school to be able to access. I think play is just as important as learning, and it would be wonderful if. Hopefully, I know this will be a success story. I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You've seen the dedicated team that's moving that boulder along in terms of being able to raise that funds and leverage with other provincial and federal monies. So at the end of the day, wouldn't it be wonderful if access was universal in terms of having a school synonymous with having a playground for the children to play on?
Now, you guys agreed to provide a letter of support to the Parents Committee, and you guys also agreed to advocate on their behalf to government departments and others. But you said that as far as the budget, it's going to have to wait till budget deliberations. Are you guys limited by how much money you're going to be able to give them?
Well, it'll be part of the conversation. So usually we'll know precisely where we are in terms of operational budget, in terms of capital budget, to figure out, okay, what do we have put aside for donations or sponsorships, and what part of that are we able to provide for that new playground build. So we don't have all the information tonight to be able to. I wish we had all kinds of money where we could have made a motion to make a financial contribution this evening, but we just don't have all that information. And as obviously, as 2024 is in the rear view mirror, we're working on setting a budget for the upcoming year. So we definitely would want to make sure that we plan that appropriately and see. And we don't know what that amount is going to be, but I know with the support around the table, I'm sure that council will consider it during budget time.
Now, Town Councillor Blaine McQuarrie mentioned that, it's not just a school playground too, but it's something that could benefit the community. But is it possible there could be some problem with community access, being it is a school playground, and, there could be maybe some barriers to everybody in the community being able to access that at some point in time?
Well, that certainly would be a question for the school board. I'm not 100% certain what their rules are in terms of after-hour use, but whatever those rules are, I know that it's still the playground was well used after hours in the past. There's not much of a playground to use currently, and as we know, different rules and regulations do change over time. So that would have to be, I guess, determined with the straight area.
But it would be good to be able to have that, I guess, in the community, especially the
Sure.
residents of that area
Absolutely.
where the community part or playground isn't as close, and it would kind of fulfill that need, I guess, in that area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So not just the playground itself, but some of the grounds in terms of the running track and the playing sports like soccer, etc., are happening after hours. I know at one time events like Relay for Life were held there after hours. So I mean, schools oftentimes are very much very kind of integral in the community, and whether it's a playground, whether it's a sports field, etc. So I guess time will tell what that relationship could look like in the future.
Port Hawkesbury CAO Terry Doyle then talked about the town's strategic visioning session that took place in December, as well as another strategic planning session that took place on January 9th to identify the priorities in this new council term. You mentioned the strategic planning session that you had last month. Maybe if you can talk about what was discussed at that session.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had Town of Port Hawkesbury staff, we had our new council present, and we had the Cape Breton Partnership came to assist with that process. So we talked about, some strides that we've made as a town. We talked about some of the issues and opportunities that we all heard at doors when we were campaigning the municipal election. We talked about what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are some of our biggest opportunities, and what are some gaps that we need to, I guess, address in order to maximize those opportunities. So just to try to set us up for success. The reason why we wanted to do a strategic visioning session is once, and of course we started that process. We still are planning to meet this week to take the document that was produced from that to determine, okay, what are short-term goals, what are medium-term goals, what are long-term goals, and set a pathway to success in terms of achieving those goals. Part of the work that we have ahead of us is determining, do we need a committee? Do we need to strike a committee to bring the talent around this one particular opportunity or challenge to move something further? So part of the outcome of our strategic planning session will be determining, do we need to strike some very strategic committees to do that work? What work can be moved along with council and staff? And maybe there's some work that gets put on the back burner. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are creating a pathway for success for the town. Obviously, some of those goals we might not see any success for the whole 4 years, because some of them are stretch goals and some of them are, it's almost like planting a tree. You might not feel the shade on your face. Maybe councils down the road will, but that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't be planting that seed. So there are some things that we need to do that will be good for the long term of improvement of the town, and there are some short term goals that we can do as well. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the strategic goals that we do set for ourselves, we want to make sure that these goals are, that we see ourselves reflected in them as elected officials. We want to make sure that the staff feel confident that, these are some goals that we can set for ourselves, that we can achieve in terms of a work balance, in terms of financial implications, and to make sure that we are continuing, like if there are some financial implications to some of those goals, like how are we determining financial partners to be able to achieve some of those goals. So some of that committee work is going to be very locally based, but some of that committee work is going to be regional as well, in terms of, we know that economic development isn't a line you draw in the sand right around the town of Port Hawkesbury. Like, we have municipal partners around us, we have First Nation partners around us that I think will be critical to have around the table, to pursue some of those goals. And maybe, some of those goals can be very hyper-focused to Port Hawkesbury. So at the end of the day, we want to flesh that out a little bit more and then come out with a document where we can roll up our sleeves and get right to work in terms of those, short and medium-term goals, but keep our eye on those long-term stretch goals as well.
When do you anticipate being able to finish that strategic planning document?
Well, we want to be hopefully ambitiously understanding what kind of committees that we need to identify and strike. And hopefully at our first meeting in February, that we have an idea of the committees that we want to strike. And then during the month of February, we may have some already existing committee members who may want to sit on some of those committees. And then we'll also want to do a call out to see if there's any interest out there. And sometimes, you can put a call out and hope people volunteer, but sometimes you have to tap people on the shoulder too. Sometimes you have to say, oh, I see your talent and you could lend so much to this particular committee and help really move Port Hawkesbury or the region along. And that's okay. And sometimes it's nice when you get tapped on the shoulder to say, oh my God, you have so much to offer and towards helping grow the town. So I think we'll employ a couple of strategies to make sure that we choose the right committees to get the job done, but also make sure that we have a great pool of a brain bank and talent at those committees, so that we don't want to try the same things we've done in the past, because it's the definition of insanity if you keep doing things the way you've always done them and expect a different result, right? So we want to make sure that we're always doing things differently. So rather than continuing with the same committees we had last term, we want to make sure, are those still the right committees? Like, let's look at the committees we need to strike, very focused on the goals that we want to achieve, and go from there. So I understand municipal government isn't static. Sometimes you do have to adjust, to the changing landscape that is municipal government, and sometimes there's new opportunities that present themselves when things change in other orders of government, and that's fine. So we'll be flexible, but at the same time, very focused in achieving our goals.
I wasn't sure if I heard Terry wrong, but I could swear that CAO Terry Doyle had said that the goals for the strategic planning exercise seem to fall into 4 main categories. Was that the case, or did I mishear that?
Well, right now we have 3 strategic categories, and of course, they're not set in stone. We will have to take those categories and flesh them out further and figure out, which one of those if you envision those categories as a bucket, like if we want to achieve this piece of work, if it doesn't belong in any of those 3 buckets, then obviously, we have to figure out, how do we achieve that and what does that look like? So right now, our 3 working categories are community development, economic development, and housing. So those are the 3 kind of big items that were through the process of our first strategic planning session. They were like the glaringly obvious items that were brought forward by not only by council, but also staff contributions, etc. So those are 3 big things. Housing, I think, is still very much in people's minds. It touches absolutely everything from doctor recruitment and medical healthcare retention to the retention of workforce. As the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce will tell you, that's a big challenge for small and medium-sized business currently, to making sure that we're growing our population. If there's no housing available, we are not going to grow as a town. So, I mean, that's a big important one. Economic development, if we're not looking for new revenue sources, we're not going to grow as quickly as a town or in a way that will be inclusive and support every single person living in town. And of course, community development. We want to make sure that we are inclusive, that we are accessible, all of those things, so for community development, there's a lot in that bucket, like from accessibility to inclusion, to beautification, waterfront development, all of the puzzle pieces that you put together to make the best community possible. So there are three very broad categories. So we're going to have a lot of fun figuring out what our goals and our committees that we need to strike, and making sure that we have the people around the table to make some successful goals happen.
Finally, CAO Terry Doyle discussed a meeting on January 15th to review the town's bylaws. Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton then spoke about bylaw enforcement options.
Bylaw enforcement coming up now is a topic that's going to arise during budget talks. I know this has been a problem for the town in recent years for everything from animal control to winter parking violations. So is there any sense of what the talks are going to be like? Are you just basically, especially with the new councillors, opening it up saying, okay, what should we be spending money on for bylaw enforcement? Essentially, where do we go from here?
So really that question, the answer to that question is twofold. So on one side of that coin, we want to take a look at all of our bylaws to make sure that we're modernizing them to today's standards, so that they're also right-sized in terms of the size of our town and a growing town. So what bylaws do need to be updated? The other side of that coin is enforcement. So we currently have different methods of enforcing different bylaws, but we also have gaps for some bylaws where there's no pathway to enforcement. So these are the kinds of conversations we want to have over the next couple of months, so that we can kind of get a general understanding for our new councillors, and really for all of council, to determine what are we currently doing and what do we need to do. Where do we need to go to make sure that A, we have all of our bylaws modernized and updated as much as possible, and B, make sure that we have a pathway to enforcement for those bylaws. And it could be a mixed bag. It could be, obviously there'll be a partnership with the RCMP for some of those bylaws. There could be a partnership with other municipalities, say for example, partnering for animal control, etc. And it could be maybe the sharing of a permanent bylaw officer. There could be many options that we can consider. Maybe some of those bylaws could be enforced by some of our current staff. So right now, we lean heavily on staff taking the place of bylaw enforcement, in some regards, and the RCMP in other regards, but we do have some gaps that we need to address.
That answered a couple of my questions right off the bat, but I am curious. So has winter parking arisen as an issue again? I know it's been a problem in the last couple of years, and people have brought their thoughts and concerns to council. What are you hearing or not hearing, as it were, so far?
So that is definitely an issue that we've been working on over the last several years. And I really want to, certainly, offer my gratitude to the RCMP, who's been pretty critical in improving that situation. And they've been working very closely with the town. And we've also been working to make sure that citizens have the correct information in terms of our winter parking ban, to make sure they understand, okay, when is it appropriate to park on the side of the road, or when is it not appropriate? And if they are parking on the side of the road and it's an unfortunate time or there's a snowstorm, the cars are going to be towed. So, of course, it's been a process of making sure the citizens are informed, and then slowly going towards a warning phase, and then going towards a phase where they're going to be looking at fines or potentially having their cars towed. So you don't jump from A to Z right away. It is a process. So you want to make sure that that everybody has the correct information, so that at the end of the day, if they do get a ticket or if they do have their car towed, it's they've had plenty of opportunities to comply with that bylaw.
Now, you mentioned the dog bylaw and you mentioned the winter parking and bylaw. Are there other bylaws that are under review as well in addition to those?
Yeah, well, I know our CAO did mention vending bylaw, other bylaws that we may want to look at, noise bylaw, et cetera. So, I mean, we want to look at all of our bylaws. Some bylaws, haven't been changed maybe since the 80s or 90s, and, some will need to be updated. So it's going to be, it's not going to be an A to Z. It's going to be a process, so that, as we're updating bylaws, it's a good exercise in understanding enforcement. So when you're looking at the bylaw from a practicality perspective and a functioning perspective, want to make sure we're reviewing and updating those from an enforcement perspective as well. So it's a great activity to kind of do in unison together.
And what aspects of those bylaws? You mentioned enforcement, but are there aspects other than enforcement in those bylaws that you guys are looking at reviewing?
Sorry, what was your question again?
No, other than enforcement of those bylaws, what other aspects of those bylaws you're looking at?
So you definitely want to look at updating, like what are the consequences of if a bylaw or a policy has been what's the word I'm looking for?
Violated.
Violated, or if there's an infraction of some sort. So, perhaps, a fine from 1980 might not be big enough deterrent. So, I mean, there could be adjusting of like fine amounts. There could be adjusting of, like, say, for example, if there's a licensing fee, to make sure that it's appropriate with, 2025 and what are other municipalities' bylaws in terms of fines, in terms of costing for licensing, et cetera. So we want to make sure that everything's kind of at par with, other similarly sized towns.
As far as enforcement goes, you talked about some other examples. Or would there be any bylaws outside of the ones that you guys talked about tonight that might require some enforcement? I know you said the existing now you do. There are some cases where the town is doing its own enforcement. Sometimes you guys are partnering with DRCMP. So maybe if you want to talk about that, like outside of the dog bylaw and the noise bylaw, or maybe even the winter parking, if there are others other than those.
I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but we'll probably have a little bit, I guess, more, like the staff report will review what bylaws are we currently using staff to enforce, what bylaws are we currently leaning on the RCMP or partnering with the RCMP with regard to enforcement, and what bylaws do we have but, aren't being enforced at all, or perhaps are just, archaic and need to be updated. And so I mean, like for example, like registering animals, like registering your dogs. So I mean that, like, there are multiple facets of particular bylaws that you would require, other pieces that would need to be done. And that's not just about enforcement. So enforcement is great, for example, for an animal bylaw, or a dog bylaw, I should say. But if you don't have a working knowledge of what dogs or what type of dogs you have in the community, there's some missing pieces, I think, that we have to look at to make sure that we, again, are setting ourselves up for success in terms of, making sure we have an understanding of the bylaw, making sure it's enforceable, making sure fines are appropriate, and making sure that citizens have the correct information at their disposal to be able to make sure that they're able to follow any bylaws or policies.
Is it possible there might be ways other than using staff for the RCMP to enforce, like contracting out or getting
Absolutely.
private individuals?
Absolutely. I mean, so staff will bring us probably several options that we can look at during budget deliberations. So some of it could be contracted out to other municipalities who currently have staff who are doing similar work, where we may only need it on a very kind of part-time basis. So maybe contracting that out to one of our neighbors who do have permanent staff doing that kind of work. That could be an option. It could be sharing a position between, some municipalities who also have gaps, so that, maybe between 2 or 3 municipalities, you can actually get somebody on a full-time basis, versus it's really hard to attract and retain somebody part-time to do that kind of work. But if you kind of pool some need from other areas, then perhaps you can kind of offer something more full-time if it's one person who can do some enforcement. And maybe there are some things that staff can still do. Maybe there's some things that RCMP can still do. So I guess it'd be kind of like putting together a bylaw puzzle to figure it in terms of enforcement, to make sure that we're identifying current gaps and making sure we're bridging those gaps.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.